we can see that some of these people are prepared to live dangerously, to live boldly, illegally, before they even enter Bloomsbury. Their political opinions, their personal affections, all of this could prove disastrous in conventional London society.
The Bloomsbury Group was a collection of artists, writers, and other assorted intellectuals located in the heart of Bloomsbury, one of the more studious and bohemian areas of London. From roughly 1907 to the mid-1920s, they would meet at 46 Gordon Square about every Thursday and Friday to discuss, well, lots of things. Post-impressionism, philosophy, left-wing politics, and, well, of course, art. The name Virginia Woolf is probably the most well-known out of all of the Bloomsburys, and being such a well-known English writer, I'm sure that all of her stories were very similar to that of other British writers at the time, so let's take a look at some of her stories. Orlando is the story of a prolific young man in the court of Elizabeth I who wakes up one day and discovers he is transformed into a woman. That's a little unusual. Let's take a... To the Lighthouse tells the story of a large family and their friends visiting a lighthouse using an omniscient narration that shifts often contradictory points of view from character to character, often in the middle of a sentence. Well, that's a little bit strange. Oh, this is her most popular one. Mrs. Dalloway, a story about an upper-class woman preparing for a dinner party and a World War I veteran who commits suicide due to PTSD. Would you excuse me? Would you excuse me for just a second? So Virginia Woolf was actually a countercultural writer who pioneered the representation of mental health issues in the LGBT community in her writing. Are you afraid of Virginia Woolf yet? Lucky for you, we're moving on. Roger Fry was one of the oldest members of the group. He was a true intellectual, an English art critic and gentleman who coined the term post-impressionism. In 1910, he hosted an art exhibition that introduced London to artists like Paul Cézanne and Pablo Picasso. But due to the incoherent nature of their paintings, it was panned by critics and even called pornographic. He joined the Bloomsbury Group, and with their help, he concocted a brand new entry into the art world. Furniture. The Omega Workshop was set up in 1913 as a place for artists and interior designers to create whatever bonkers ideas for household appliances they could think of, from a simple wicker chair to a mind-melting nightstand. The man himself said to a journalist in 1913, quote, "It is time that the spirit of fun was introduced into furniture and fabrics. We have suffered too long from the dull and stupidly serious." And sure, you might think that furniture is a weird hill to die on, but hey, I'm not going to question one of the Met curators about art. Speaking of questioning things, Lytton Strachey was probably the best of all of the Bloomsburys to do exactly that, which is really saying something. A physically weak child, he spent more attention on things like French culture and theater rather than sports, which really did a number on his social life. But I believe personally that the separation from the norm at an early age allowed him to really figure out what Edwardian culture was really about, from his revolutionary books that completely changed the biography genre to his opinions on current events. Back in those days, you couldn't tell the government that you didn't want to fight if you got drafted, not even for religious reasons. Most of the group completely disapproved of war as a method of getting anything done, since the poor and disenfranchised were the ones that were actually fighting and dying instead of the people that were actually had a problem with each other. When the war began, Bloomsbury Group member Clive Bell released the anti-war pamphlet Peace at Once, which was so unpopular the mayor of London ordered every copy to be burned. So he, Lytton, and artist Duncan Grant had to go into hiding from the government. Lytton ended up calling Lady Adeline Morel, the insanely rich and sympathetic friend of the group that was willing to hide them until their controversies blew over. You know, that super common friend that everyone has. Now, I'm not saying the Bloomsbury Group single-handedly invented the concept of saying no to war, but in 1916, the British government passed an act that allowed objectors to do alternative things like gardening instead of being forced to fight, so Who am I to say what's true and what isn't? But one thing I absolutely know to be true is that this group of friends influenced the world in a lot more ways than most people seem to think. And I didn't even get to everything in this documentary. There's a lot more things that I didn't cover. The economist John Maynard Keynes was in the Bloomsbury Group, and he's one of the most respected figures in all of finance. And the writings of Virginia Woolf's husband Leonard actually helped influence the policy of the League of Nations. The group was very accepting of the LGBT community, since many of them were in it. And Virginia Woolf had a myriad of mental health issues like depression that the group actually respected and helped her manage. So, who knew, right? Who knew that this small group of friends with radical beliefs on art and politics and literature could change the world so much? You probably didn't. So, let me ask you the question. How do you know that you and your friends can't do the same? I mean, the odds of that happening are certainly just astronomically small, but, you know, they're there.